You're welcome back. Well, the Federal Executive Council has approved the Federal Roads and Bridges tolling policy and regulations aimed at reintroducing toll gates on the roads. According to the Minister of Works and Housing, Mr. Babatunde Fashola, the policy and regulations were developed after extensive consultations with various stakeholders within and outside the government. This conversation has been on since 2019, but now it seems the policy has been approved and operations would start in earnest. Well, to discuss the implication of this, we have two guests joining us. We have the development finance expert and partner at Escrow Wealth Investment, Mr. Ayodeji Onigbogi, and also joining us virtually, we have Gbolahan Olojede, Executive Director, DMA Advisory and Management Services Limited, to tell us what you think about this plan. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us.
Good to have you both.
Yeah, it's my pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
Great. So let's start with you, Mr. Ayodeji, in the studio. Now, some years ago, of course, the tolls were brought down, and now it's coming back. What has changed? What's the need, or what changed, between then, when it was brought, and now?
The toll was removed precisely, I think, during the Obasanjo regime, if you remember. And after this, we're now in about 22 years now, and we are going back. Nigeria is a country whereby we do things, there's no continuity. Because what I expect is, what Obasanjo did, they should develop on it. What the present regime should have worked on is, because if you look at the economic situation now, things are very tight for people. This is not the time to toll the gates. And then if you're going to use a toll gate, you should try as much as possible to cushion the economy. If you want to provide, you have to provide more infrastructures, and then people will have, there'll be succor to the masses. Because now, if you want to toll the gates, where do you want to toll? If you want to toll Lagos-Ibadan Express Road, where do you want to toll? Is it you're going to take the toll gate back to the 7-Up, or you're moving into Ibafo or Mowe? So there are various things that government needs to discuss before they implement or come up with any policy. Because if you look at it, this is just when you are marching and when you are having a march past, they call something staccato. When you go zigzag, we're just going zigzag. Policy adjusts, policy somersault, and doesn't pay us as a country. Because number one, we've used money to build, to destroy, and we're not going to use money to build again.
Right.
Okay, so before we ask you those other means that you're talking about that you think the government should embrace, let's find out what Mr. Olojede thinks, about this. Mr. Olojede, he thinks this is not the right time, and there seems to be a lot of policy somersault. What's your thoughts on this possible return of the tolls?
Well, I think it's the right step in the right direction. The mistake one might want to make is to think that the introduction of the toll on motorable roads is an additional cost. When in the real sense, it might not be an additional cost. Let me use the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway that Ayodeji has mentioned. By the way, Ayodeji and I used to sit right across in one of the organizations where we worked with. So let's look at Lagos-Ibadan. Lagos-Ibadan is ordinarily a 1 hour thereabout journey. But when the road is not motorable, that same journey will become 2 hours. So what it means is, if I used to consume 1,500 fuel to go to Ibadan, if that road is not motorable and that 1 hour journey becomes 2 hours, one of the immediate costs I can see there is that I will consume 2 times the 1,500. So I'm already paying an additional cost of 1,500 just on fueling. I'm not talking about the man hours that will be lost. I'm not talking about the wear and tear on the vehicle. I'm not talking about the health implication of taking a 1 hour journey in 2 hours. By the way, I've taken that particular journey in 8 hours before, this same Lagos-Ibadan. So what is important is that whatever we can do to ensure that our roads remain sustainably motorable is a step in the right direction. And I think tolling will help us, provided the toll will be collected efficiently and will be deployed to ensuring that those roads remain motorable. Once they're able to achieve that, is a plus for the user, because when he gets on the motorable road, is a net return to all of our pockets if the road is motorable. The 200 naira cost is not an issue. It's not the issue.
Okay. All right. Let's come to Mr. Onigbogi. Now, you talked about other means. You know, what are these funding alternatives?
Presently, what government is doing that they are not doing right is the tax system in Nigeria is skewed to the poor. And when I say to the poor is government should get more money from the rich. Because it has been argued that the rich in Nigeria pay less tax, while the poor pay more tax. You're going to look at it vis-a-vis from the earning power. Someone that takes a 20,000 naira salary, probably you are taxing him to the tune of 2,000-3,000. And somebody that makes profit of probably 100 million, these are the people that you need to cut out of the cake from. So government needs to readjust and refocus how the tax system looks like. They should tax the rich more. Ostentatious goods that are much more expensive should be heavily taxed so that it will discourage Nigerians. Because as Nigerians, we've been used to the Gucci of this world. Let's try as much as possible to start something that is local. Let's try and fix our water. Let's try and consume our products. One of the reasons why the dollar is going up is because we produce nothing. We only consume. And we don't just consume cheap things. We consume expensive things. And all this thing comes at a cost. Most of the things we use here, white people don't use them. Go to England, you will see what rich men, what they wear. They just wear cheap watches. They feel, because they understand what expense means. But here, because the way we get money here is funny. We feel that to wear expensive things is the best, and it's not. We need to change our orientation as Nigerians, and that's the only way we can all get to the promised land.
Okay, well, we'll get to that promised land. Well, Mr. Olojide, you talked about efficiently collecting these tolls. And, you know, even when you talk about tax, normally, a lot of Nigerians are reluctant to pay tax because they believe they cannot see the fruit of the tax. So how can the government convince the people that it will be different with this toll, that really when we pay whatever amount we pay, we're going to see the result on the road, we're going to feel it, and it's not going to be mismanaged?
Yes, that is a genuine concern from the members of the public, because there's a huge trust deficit between the government and the government, and it is the duty of government to fill that gap. Now, efficiency of collection, you know, we are not at the same level that we were 18 years ago when those tolls were removed. If you remember, part of the problem with those toll gates then was the fact that a lot of leakages were going on. A lot of the income that were being collected there were going into private pockets and not into government coffers. The portion that goes into government coffers probably was going into a general government account where it is probably shared as part of FAC or something. So it wasn't being deployed. It wasn't even available to be deployed for the maintenance of those roads. However, 18 years after, the capacity to collect tolls efficiently has improved dramatically. There are a lot of toll collection going on currently, if you take a state like Lagos, for example. And it's been shown that it's possible with electronic collections, with you have the scanner one that they put on top of a car. You can pay a year ahead. You just drive through and you are fine. So only a little bit will still remain cash because of the nature of our economy. There's still a whole lot of cash in transactions going on. But even those ones, there will be mechanism for monitoring to ensure that those money are being collected and are being collected efficiently. So the other part is For the roads that are concession, it's not all the roads, some of the roads, about 12 roads of the federal government are to be concessioned under the HDMI program. For those roads, there will be a contract between the concessionaire and the government, and there is a regulator in the midst, which is ICRC, to ensure that each party to this agreement play their part. So the concessionaire must ensure that the road remains sustainably motorable, and if it is not, the sanctions must be there. If government fail, if the regulator fail to do this, we may not be able to reap the benefit of expanding this particular program to other roads. But the lesson for us is, if we're sure we want this to work and we want to be able to expand this program, then the regulator and government must make sure that all parties do their part to the program. And that will include being able to deploy those tolls to sustainably ensuring we have a motorable road.
All right, Mr. Olojide, I stay with you there. According to the minister, this is the approval of the board policy that will guide tolling, so that local people, states, local government, all those who manage roads, investors who want to come in, from your perspective, what should be the highlight of this policy for effective operation?
I think the highlights have already been defined in this broad policy, because that broad policy had already spoken about what are the qualifying roads. You know, for the federal government, for example, it has to be a dual carriage road. What must be the state of that road? It has been defined to be that it must be motorable. You also have the qualifying vehicles. What are the vehicles that are qualified? So you have the exemption rule. What are the vehicles that are exempted? So you have the rates. The rates have been defined under this broad policy. So I think the highlights of the policy has been spelled out in this broad document. What we should be talking about is now the nitty-gritty. After we have a broad policy document, then there are those further details that will make it easily implementable. Let me give you an example. Someone has said, okay, motorbikes are exempted under this broad policy. And he said, look, what if I'm riding a BMW of a 20 million naira BMW bike? Why should I be exempted? Because the reason for exempting motorcycle or bicycle and tricycle is because it is believed that those are the lower rung of the ladder. So you don't want to burden them further by asking them to pay too. But if I'm riding a 20 million naira bike, I should pay. And that is where the detailed implementation guidelines will come into play. But as far as the broad is concerned, I think most of the highlights have been addressed.
And I hope we would get to those details, because that's part of what Mr. Adedeji was talking about when he said that it seems that the tax system actually puts more burden on the lower income earners. Because I think for the example that you gave, if you have someone who can afford a very expensive and luxurious motorcycle or motorbike or bicycle, and then the person is exempted, as well as the person who is really down the, how do we now balance that? At what point do we bring that, balance into the equation?
Yeah, the balancing will be addressed at the level of the details. This is what we have right now, is a broad policy. Then for implementation, we now sit down and look at the very details of the policy. It is at that point that we will address this. If you look at the broad highlights, it even spoke about, when you look at the rates, you see that the commercial buses have the lowest rate. So the intention of that policy at the broad level is to say, oh, the people who commute in those commercial buses are also part of the lower part of the ladder. So they shouldn't be bothered. While the guy who has a huge SUV that is a fuel guzzler somewhere is going to pay about $500 for that. So it's all part of capacity to pay being built into this structure that we have.
All right, well, let's come back to the studio now. We have the 15 trillion naira infrastructure corporation, the Infraco. We have the credits to tax, you know, effort by the government. So there are a lot of efforts to actually develop infrastructure in the country. Do you see them clashing? Is it too many things going towards? I mean, we have SEC. I mean, the Securities and Exchange Commission they've also empowered them. Like last week, we had one of the banks. They have infrastructure fund for investors to come on board and all that. So we have a lot of effort. Do you see them clashing, or are these?
Or they complement each other?
No.
Because you talked about the issue of policy.
Let's get it very right. This is not the first time Nigeria has been having funds for various projects. If you quite remember, there were times when you get Ondo State World Bank water projects, Ekiti State World Bank water project. What is this done? The issue I've said about Nigeria is we are going to create source of money, source of funds for a project, and the project will never be done. This is not the first time. We have had several instances of various projects, various funding, and you discover it will not be done. Just like as we're talking, I remember that when we wanted to start the rail system, Lagos, Ibadan, you discover that they've started they've commissioned the Lagos, Ibadan. The rail system is working now. But we've been hearing instances of people hijacking the payment system. I think you've had something like that. So how effective will even be the tolling be if the rail system that is supposed to be something that is new, something that we need to embrace, is already getting faulty?
But Mr. Olojede has well pointed to us that there's been a lot of development by now. I mean, we've seen a lot of technology and, you know, new innovations imputed into the tolling and the payment system. E-payment is now easier than it was. You have the concession or the toll gates, you know, in Lagos. You know, there are different ways that perhaps we should
let's always remember the Nigerian factor.
Right.
I want some more than that.
All right. So there are private sector, you know, efforts also with this. For instance, the bank just launched its infrastructure fund for long-term investment. What challenges do you see, you know, going forward with this private sector?
Apart from the Nigerian factor.
Apart from the Nigerian factor.
I mean, I think let's sometimes believe that things are different.
I'm not saying things will not work in Nigeria. In the long run, things will work.
Okay.
But in the short run, we all suffer for it. Now, what banks are coming up with is a brilliant idea. But what I now think banks should do is the monitoring. Because see, if you don't monitor things effectively, you will have the funds. Because all projects, the bank will mobilize the fund and they'll give it to people at the ends of affairs. Then effective monitoring is quite important. Because if you don't monitor effectively, you will discover that after doing work in civil operation, they call something certificate of work done. Certificate of work done must be done in milestone, so that you know that if these are not been certified, you don't disburse further funds. Because if we are not careful, you will have discovered that the pool of funds will have been disbursed and there's nothing on ground. So effective monitoring must be ensured, must be in place to ensure that the fund is used judiciously.
Or do you believe more in the private sector?
No. Don't let us go into that. Public and private, the best are in the private sector. I won't say more than that.
Okay.
All right, we have to thank both of you so much for joining us to discuss the issue of infrastructure funding in Nigeria. We have Mr. Ayodele Jonigbogi, a development finance expert and partner at Escrow Wealth Investments. Thank you so much for joining us in the studio. And virtually, we had Debola Olojede, the Executive Director, DMA Advisory and Management, also telling us what he thinks about it. And we do hope, for the good of every Nigerian, I mean, we do hope that infrastructure development actually comes to pass, even if it's the tolling. Like Mr. Olojede told us, the Nigerians will not complain as long as they see that the wear and tear in their vehicles and everything is reduced. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us this morning. We do appreciate it and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
So we'll take a break now. When we come back, we'll head straight to the markets. To stay with us.